I'm going to use it to signal the beginning of every podcast from now on. Well, that's appropriate. What? It's from Venice, the bottle opener. And we are drinking Italian beer. Putting your thumb up on a podcast can't be very comfortable.
This isn't the part of the podcast. Unless you keep it in, which you probably will, because...
Yeah, well, I'm the only one drinking this week.
What?
Because I'm the only one that opened my beer on the podcast, so I'm the only one that's allowed to drink it on the podcast.
Too fucking bad.
Speaking of which, I get confused because I've heard...
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, putting your hand over it's not going to stop it. Yeah, see if that happens again. You're dripping it on your transformer. Stick your gob over it.
I wasn't exactly anticipating it.
No, but you will be next time. I would suggest you go get a cloth and mop it up because it's going to be sticky. You're determined to make me have to do some editing, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to sit here and slurp into the microphone so I don't have to. I can tell my Peroni story.
Yeah, but if you are going to just slope into the microphone, please edit that out for my sake.
Well, you don't listen to it anyway.
I sometimes do.
Oh, that reminds me of days gone by when we used to be able to go out and eat. Although we can go out and eat now, can't we? Eat out to help out, it's called, isn't it? Which I think is a rather unfortunate turn of phrase, but...
Yeah, because they can't actually be asked paying people properly while it's still not safe to go out.
Yeah, you just completely glossed over my innuendo, but never mind. Yes, reminding me of
because I'm not as dirty-minded as you.
when
Surprisingly.
Peroni reminds me of Pizza Express. Other chains are available. Although, where was it I had? Oh, I'll tell you what's nice. If you ever get a chance, try Peroni Grand Reserve. Grand Reserva. Yeah, so my... Did you just use a tea towel to mop the floor?
Yeah.
Oh, teenagers, students, whatever you call them.
I mean, I'm both, so...
Yeah.
Depends what group you want to take aim at, but keep in mind if you're taking aim at students, you'll be owning yourself there.
Yeah, I pretty much take aim at myself every day, so... No, it's not meant to sound the way it did. Yes, I'm going to wait until Firebolt returns because I mentioned about choosing, because we have 3 types of beer to choose from this evening and we were talking about which order to do them in. And I see when this coronavirus started up, there was all this stuff about Corona beer and people were talking about Ronies and as like Corona beer, but didn't make any sense to me because it's like a Roni to me would surely be more appropriately a nickname for a Peroni rather than a Corona because it's not a Coroni, is it?
Yeah, but people are idiots.
Yeah,
particularly the kind of people equating coronavirus to Corona beer, probably doubly.
This is going to be a shit episode.
Well, it is if you say it's going to be.
I'm going to win £1 million.
It doesn't quite work like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, but like if you expect it to be a shit episode, then you're going to behave... You're going to make it a shit episode by just moaning about it all the time, which makes for a shit episode.
Can I just moan for 2 hours?
Well, that's what the shit episodes are normally like.
Is it? Have we got any shit episodes?
there definitely was a couple of shit episodes when we were in like a particularly like down spot. Like the low 20s, I think, were pretty bad.
Were they?
We were just depressed.
I'm a bit shit today. I don't know why. But I got a bit stressed.
Well, there's
generally been
stuff
quite
to do, but also when it's raining, that doesn't help.
Yeah, generally been quite up mentally for the last couple of weeks, but today took me by surprise. Just this afternoon, I just got a bit stressed.
Would you like to start the podcast?
Would I like to start it? Oh, thank you very much.
No, no. Would you like to?
Oh, I thought you were being gracious.
Would you like me
there.
to start the podcast?
I thought you were being gracious rather than continuing to display your ability to.
Well, it would be in keeping
be
in
the subject matter.
Introduce it.
Oh. Do you know, my brother used to call me an ignoramus.
Yeah, that's because your brother has some sense.
Oh, really?
Well, he is a physicist.
Well, how is that related to an ignoramus? Surely that would be biology.
Well, it just means that he's likely to have more of an idea of what that would be. I don't think an ignoramus is an actual creature.
It should be. It should be a dinosaur.
I'm an ignoramus.
Go on then, start up.
Right. Oh, bloody hell. This is how this always starts. You go, oh, I feel like shit, I'm really stressed out. And then as soon as you're able to just take the piss out of me, you cheer right up.
Well, you've spent the last, however long it's been, insulting me and being nasty and spilling your load on the floor. And I'm just, it gets me into the frame of mind to get revenge. So come on, I'm waiting. And so is the audience, such as they are.
Hello, Internet. I'm Firebolt. Fuck's sake.
I didn't even have to, did I?
No, I could tell you were about to say something because you took a big in breath.
I was just breathing.
You're allowed to do that.
God dang.
Wait, shut up. That was quite a disturbing noise. Shut the fuck up, right? Seriously.
I'm bored. I just want to make silly noises and cheer myself up.
You can do that on your own time.
Not like that.
Hello, Internet. I'm Firebolt.
And I'm the Orbiter.
You always do a little bit of a variation on that.
I know, I'm going for a world record.
And welcome to Breaking Bollocks.
Just fucking ignore me then.
Episode. What was it, 65?
Damn ignorant. No, 64.
64? Are you sure?
Yes.
I'm
pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Well, I'm just pretty, but you know. I feel pretty.
Shut up. What is it?
What a great way to start the podcast, just by
Oh, it is 64.
clicking. Oh, what? I'm speechless that I'm actually right about something. I mean, woe betide anyone would ever assume that I could actually get something fucking right. I mean, really.
I feel like this is about something else.
What? What? But I'm going to have to think of something now.
You seem to be unusually worked up by this.
I know. I'm just venting. I'm just using the public as well. The 15 to 20 people who tend to listen to these.
That's a good audience.
To vent. Well, depends who they are, really, doesn't it? There might be.
Well, yeah, they might all be.
Might be a serial killer in amongst them, for all we know.
To be fair, I think there's probably worse people in our audience. Anyway, yeah, shall we start with news?
We can try, but I've been avoiding it because it's shit. Well, I say I've been avoiding it. I've been looking at it, but I've not been seeing anything. Do you know, the news came on TV earlier today when I switched the TV on to watch Jessica Jones. And it was somebody ranting on about... and actually, Mum thought it was Jonathan Pye, but it wasn't. It was one of the main BBC correspondents from Westminster. But he was stood there just ranting and raving about... I think it was still going on about the Spanish quarantine thing, and I thought as something new happened, but it's like, I saw that on the news a couple of days ago, or was it only yesterday? I don't know. I couldn't give a fuck anymore about... I suppose what I'm trying to say is that, I don't know, tell me what's going on in the world.
Well, in Portland, there are still federal officers arresting people, and they're unmarked as well, which sort of led to people calling them basically secret police, because that's essentially how they're functioning. Taking people into unmarked vehicles, taking them to a cell, asking if they'll waive their rights, and then if they say no, just not charging them with anything.
Okay, and what if they say yes?
Well, then I'm assuming they can basically just do what they want to them, but it sort of puts people in a position where, like, if they don't know their rights, then...
I listened to a Dizzy Rascal album yesterday.
Okay. What does that have relevance to anything in any way?
Well, yeah. In that, well, I'll give you a bit of background. That my ridiculous efforts to come up with the biggest and most amazing music library of all time was beginning to take my life away. A bit like your West Korea world government project spreadsheet thing. I was just using it to not do other stuff. So what I've started doing instead, and I think I might have mentioned this, did I? Last week? No. I've basically gone to the rocklist.net website, which has archives of all the music industry magazines, defunct ones as well, and the different end of year top album lists for that year. And I'm basically just going through them and just adding, at the moment, like the last, number 50 or number 20 or whatever from each year, and just listening to. I'm using it to try to widen my appreciation for music, because I'm a kind of an album kind of person. Right. But anyway, yeah, so I'm getting quite surprised about some of the stuff that I'm listening to, and opening my horizons a bit. But Dizzy Rascal, it's you've got to be on your toes. You've got to be on the ball to listen to rap, haven't you? You kind of got to concentrate. You can't really have it in the background.
I mean, I guess you can, but like, if you want to appreciate the full message, then you kind of need to listen to the lyrics quite closely, and I think are quite fast.
With the one that I was listening to, tongue in cheek, I think it's quite important to listen to it as an album, because early on, the sort of first couple of tracks are quite gritty in terms of talking about the kind of environment and the politics and stuff and the world that he came from, that community, kind of what they have to go through. Right. People in that kind of environment. Assuming he was in London somewhere as a kid.
Possibly. I vaguely know he's an English DJ.
But it is quite revealing, and it's quite educational to listen to what kind of world a lot of these, because later on in the album, if you take individual tracks and listen to them on their own, you might quite easily come to the conclusion that they are kind of misogynistic, violent, about drugs, and basically just kind of gangster kind of world, disrespectful stuff. But when you put that kind of spin after the tracks that are about the kind of ghetto areas that kind of world comes from, it gives it a completely different kind of, you kind of realize why people are resorting to, just to get by, just doing some of the things that they do when they've really got no chance and no hope because the system just doesn't work for them.
I mean, it's a different situation and there's different reasons behind it, but that Misadventures of Ramesh Ranganathan, he sort of, at least to begin with, sort of went to countries that didn't really have such a good reputation on the world stage, and like people are kind of afraid to travel to normally.
Yeah.
And people just don't really know a huge amount about other than like some sort of tragedy. So, but like recently he's done Misadventures from My Sofa because it's in quarantine and stuff. It just sort of catching up with the people that he met while.
Where does that come from, that whole Misadventures of kind of format? Because I'm sure there was an album by a black female artist called was it Misadventures of Lauryn Hill or something like that?
I don't know. I think it's just sort of like play on adventures, really.
Yeah, but it is used, by multiple people, kind of.
I don't know. But sort of talking about the one that I was watching today, he was catching up with a journalist from Haiti.
Yeah.
And that was like the first one that he did. And obviously, a lot of people's first thoughts with that is sort of the earthquake, which I think was maybe 2010, thereabouts.
Has it always been known as Haiti? Is that how you pronounce it? Because when I was a kid, I used to think it was pronounced Haiti.
I've only heard it called Haiti.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not. I mean, it might be a time thing that things get gradually Americanized.
Well, it might also just be that you just read it one way and thought it was pronounced.
No, it wouldn't have been, because if you read it, you would think it says Haiti, but
I don't know.
Might be the teachers
sort of,
at my school or something.
One thing that they did there was basically go to one of the most impoverished neighborhoods actually in Haiti. And it's quite horrific, even still. I mean, the journalist that he was catching up with says that things have probably actually gotten worse.
Yeah.
Seeing just kids clearly malnourished in the streets.
Yeah, it does
and there's
your head in.
A literal river of garbage running through there.
And you see the affluent kind of just looking for ways to spend their money. And it's like, it's just, the world's fucked. This is just going to be...
Sort of...
I don't think, I mean, trying to link it to the subject, I don't think it's well, some of it's going to be to do with ignorance, isn't it? Because, I mean, there are people that kind of enable this sort of stuff, and we're among them, really. I saw quite...
Well, it's sort of... You do have to make a conscious effort to educate yourself.
Yeah.
And
but I mean,
look beyond the headline.
I saw quite a depressing clip from a BBC programme. I can't remember what it was, but basically, this old woman sort of saying, we're all kind of guilty here of kind of enabling and like when you go into a shop and you see like a really good bargain, like whatever clothes you're buying or whatever is really, really good price, you're like, well, I'm not going to pass up that bargain, and you buy it, and you're basically some kid in some sweatshop in the Far East is kind of...
Well, we do try and come up with better ethical standards, but like you have to remember as well there, the onus isn't entirely on the consumer.
No.
The onus is on the people actually exploiting them and then selling it on.
Yeah, but the difficulty, I suppose, is
we have some responsibility.
But like it seems to work in some areas. Like I think a lot of people like buy fair trade bananas and fair trade coffee specifically now, but things like I don't know how far it got, but some of the supermarkets were doing selling milk more expensive, exactly the same milk, but like 10p extra for a bottle to give that extra like a fair price to the farmers. And it's like, well, you should be doing that with all of them, really. But and you know, you had to choose to buy the more expensive one if you wanted. I don't know how successful that was.
But then it's sort of like the people here that are struggling to get by would obviously sort of try and cut costs by going for the cheaper one, because
yeah.
It's sort of like, I mean, I think a lot of people are sort of eager to make it, and this comes with a lot of things, climate change, but also exploitation of the third world.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's a lot of people who would,
I mean, they
love to buy an electric car.
Yeah, but like they're expensive, and the people doing most of the actual emissions there are quite rich. It's very disproportionate from what you'd expect.
And are they doing it at night?
Jesus. I mean, possibly.
So it'd be like a nocturnal emission. Sorry.
You're a dickhead.
I am. It's true.
But the point that I was making about Haiti was sort of, I mean, it apparently has gotten better over the sort of last decade. It used to be that neighborhood in particular was quite renowned for being quite violent and dangerous. However, it's sort of like when you see the conditions there, you sort of like, yeah, well, no wonder.
Yeah.
And I guess sort of it's very easy to sort of scaremonger about that. It's like, oh, violent criminals running about, but like that doesn't actually get to the root of the actual issue there.
No,
that's far more important, and it just demonizes people that didn't really have an option.
Yeah. It's not right, the world at the moment. Has it ever been?
No. And then we get to the protests, which are still going on, by the way. I've seen a lot less coverage from major news networks, but they're still very much going on, and the police are being more violent than
I was thinking about this the other day, that the whole kind of system, and I was thinking about, you know, when we were talking about the Matrix and about what the Matrix is, and you know, the ways of thinking and the kind of the system that society has put in, you know, kind of instills in you. You're kind of a product of that system, and it's really difficult to break free of that kind of that mentality that keeps everything going the way that it is.
Have you ever heard, I think it was a lyric, "The revolution will not be televised"?
Yes, I have heard that, yeah.
Do you know the meaning behind that?
Well, I would assume, well, I suppose there could be multiple meanings, really. I mean, in one way you'd think like that, obviously there are vested interests who don't want everyone to know that there's a revolution going on because it would give more power to the revolution.
Well, like the writer of that actually sort of explains what they meant and what their intention was. There might be other readings of it. It's sort of meaning that the first step to changing things, revolution, meaning revolving, changing, starts in your mind.
Yeah.
It's not the big flashy news headlines. It's not the overthrow. It starts here.
That makes sense, because, I mean, you know, you see what you might think of as a traditional kind of revolution, where you maybe get sort of rioting and protests and a breakdown of civilization, really, if it's in the news.
Well,
people have
an interest in portraying revolutions in that way.
Yeah, because that's perpetuating fear, isn't it? Which is what keeps people under control.
Well, yeah.
So,
but I mean, I think this will very much come into the discussion of ignorance. I've definitely seen, I mean, I know it's a lot of what I've seen on this is through social media, and that tends to polarize things, and it's not really a representation of real people They might just be trolls, or they might be some fringe people, because the angriest stuff tends to rise to the top. And the algorithm tends to curate it so you see certain things that would make you more angry. Whether or not intentionally, I don't know. But it gets more clicks.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure whether or not Sorry, was I interrupting you then?
Yeah, but basically sort of in response to seeing how police have reacted to protests, particularly the use of federal agents in Portland, which they are actually, from what I've heard, agents of the Department of Homeland Security, which sounds a bit strange. But also they've not been operating, and there's a legal issue here, I guess, with the permission of the mayors or the senators, governors of those states that they're in.
Where are you getting this news from? Because I'm interested, because it's one thing I was going to say was it in the mainstream media, it's kind of it's gone that way of old news that like it needs something new needs to be.
Of it.
Yeah. But they're still harping on about coronavirus every fucking day though.
Well, because there are developments there, but it's sort of the news gets their big story and then moves on. But there are still people pushing for actual real change.
Yeah.
But it sort of presents this narrative of, oh, we've heard this before. Sure, we'll change, and then nothing changes if they stop.
But yeah,
People
that's what I was going to say.
it
is difficult to keep the ball rolling, to keep the momentum.
People want to keep doing it so change actually fucking happens.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure all these promises of change and reform actually go through and something real actually changes.
Yeah.
Which is why they've been continuing for months.
Yeah.
They can't just stop because people are bored and tired of it.
No.
But basically the legal sort of question here is they're not actually operating on federal land, which I think normally they'd need permission to make arrests on, unless it's explicitly like a new law's laid out that they have permission for this.
What is federal land?
Basically land that belongs to the United States government rather than each individual state government.
Right, and do they have these federal land areas in each state then, or?
Yeah, they have varying amounts in different states. So, like, national parks would be considered federal land.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
But also a fair amount of Nevada's
I'm learning something here.
Because,
I'm reducing my ignorance.
It's basically nuclear test sites, a lot of that.
Yeah.
But there's only a small amount that actually belongs to Nevada's state government there.
See, what this kind of made me think along the lines of was that we always try to look at the meaning, and sometimes it's a bit of a daft exercise, but in this case I'm not sure. Ignorance. Now, some people have used the term blissful ignorance, and quite often especially probably more in the past, I've thought of ignorance as just non-awareness of the facts or the truth of a situation. But if you think of the roots of the word, ignore actually means something different to just not knowing something.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of, beyond just not actually being presented actual information and facts here, sort of, I guess they're sort of misinformed about what to pay attention to.
So in that sense,
and what to pick up on there.
So is ignorance just absence of knowledge about something, or is it a willful desire to not want, just really not wanting to know, wanting to ignore something?
Yeah, that there is definitely a willful ignorance in some people, and I think that becomes particularly present in political discussions when people will get new information and basically decide when it doesn't fit with what they want it to.
But the term has acquired some more benign kind of meaning, though, hasn't it? In terms of, like I said, the blissful ignorance, kind of just not knowing something. But how accurate is that in terms of what the word actually should or used to mean? In that, is being ignorant something which is your fault. Your fault. You know, if the information is there and you're ignorant of it.
It's sort of it's sort of a point where, like, when something's such a big issue and you're hearing about it so much, like, there is some responsibility for you to find out more yourself.
Yeah.
But if you aren't curious, or you just sort of have some sort of passing consumption of media on a particular topic, then you're not going to end up with the full picture there.
Yeah.
And you need to realize that. And then, there's sort of a thing of, like, people acting as if they know an awful lot when they definitely don't. It's this sort of thing, and it's a very easy way to sort of strike down someone else's argument in a sort of
by calling them
superficial
ignorant.
way. Well, that, but also there's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I've heard of it, but I'm not entirely sure what it means. Please enlighten me.
Google it quickly just to check. But basically what it means roughly is sort of the more ignorant you are in something, or I guess the less skilled you are in something, the more likely you are to sort of think of yourself highly within that.
Yeah, so the more you know, the more you're likely to say that you don't know.
Yeah. For example, to sort of make it a bit more philosophical, I think, can't remember what it's in, but some old classical work. I think it says, and the oracle said that, I think it's Plato possibly, was the wisest of all the Greeks, for he knew what he did not know.
Right. Yeah.
I'll look it up. It might be, I don't know.
Halloween Horror Nights has been cancelled.
Well, that just seems like a sensible idea.
Don't know what the stats are like in Florida at the moment. Actually, it was getting worse and worse. But yeah, like I say, they've just that'd be a bit of a bugger, wouldn't it? They've just announced a 14-day quarantine. But mind you, see people saying, "Oh, you know, it's short notice and that, and you know, we're going to lose money when we come back." It's like, well, what the fuck are you doing going on holiday at a time like this anyway?
Yeah.
It's gone all quiet. That's dead air.
Yeah, here we go. I know that I know nothing is a saying derived from Plato's account of Socrates, calling it the Socratic paradox. Yeah, he supposedly visited the Pythia, which is the Oracle of Delphi.
I've been there.
Cool. Was it enlightening?
It was fucking hot.
Well, yeah.
At least I think I've been there.
You don't know.
I'm pretty sure I have. Yeah, I'm sure I have. I went to Greece. Yeah, I'm sure I have. But see, the reason I'm questioning whether I have or not is because where I think it was like up this mountain. I don't know if it's Mount Olympus, but there was like an ancient kind of racetrack, amphitheater kind of thing.
A hippodrome.
Don't know. Yeah, I'm sure I have been there when I was 13.
Cool.
But yeah, I was pretty ignorant there. I did a run around this racetrack thing because it was like an old amphitheater place, and I thought, oh, it looks, you know, like I think it might have been where ancient Olympics were held at one point.
No, that would have been somewhere else.
I'm sure I went to the Oracle at Delphi though on that trip.
They held the Olympics in Elise, which I think is in Peloponnesia, the bottom part of Greece, whereas Delphi's in the top part of Greece.
Yeah. Don't know. Anyway.
Anyway,
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, the
'cause I really
Dunning-Kruger
want to know.
effect, cognitive bias in which people with lower ability at a task overestimate their ability. I guess sort of conversely implies that people with a higher ability either have a better idea of their ability or might even underestimate their ability, which I definitely get being a musician.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, Delphi. Formerly also called Pytho, an ancient sanctuary that grew rich as a seat of. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I have been there. I think. Not being much help, am I? Pretty sure I have. Mount Parnassus.
Oh, that's in Elise, I think.
Yeah. Occupies a site on the southwestern slope of Mount Parnassus. Now an extensive archaeological
it's
site
not.
with a small modern town of the same name nearby. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I came running back with fucking over 100 degrees and basically grabbed a can of
I'm sorry.
Coke. Grabbed a can
Are
of
you using Fahrenheit?
Coke from...
Or were you literally boiling?
No, it was the mid-80s. So, I mean, 1980s. So people were still pretty much using Fahrenheit a lot then.
Were they?
Yeah, pretty much. Because we learned, remember, when I grew up in the 70s, we learned about temperature and stuff from our parents and grandparents, and they all spoke in Fahrenheit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Weather
I
reports...
kind of just assumed Britain had always used Celsius.
well,
since
they only
Celsius was
changed to
invented.
it until... they only changed to metric in the early 70s.
Yeah, I knew that, but Celsius isn't necessarily metric.
No, but... I mean, the weather reports and that in the 70s, and I'm pretty sure the early 80s as well, used to always be in Fahrenheit. Because even now, I think if you get a really hot day in the summer, you'll see on the front of the tabloids, there'll be like sort of 90 degrees or 100 degrees or whatever.
Yeah, but I don't really pay attention to those.
No. A wise move. That's a Greek letter, isn't it? That there. What is that?
I don't know.
What a shit episode. Sorry.
Let's
You were
stop
right.
saying
You were
that.
right. You were right. You were right all along.
Well, if you keep saying it, then
But I've only said it twice.
bloody hell. Wait,
And the first time led to the awesomeness that has happened since. So if I say it again, maybe it's kind of rebooting reality. With a kick up the...
no.
Oh.
It's just no. Right.
Okay.
Back to the protest.
So I'll talk over you.
Protest.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Serious matter.
Well, stop smiling then.
Also notably, basically, for a couple of weeks, I think, mums and dads have actually gone out to basically form a wall to protect the youth protesting.
Right. Is this... You said Portland. Is
Yeah.
it going on? Because obviously it was going on across America and around the world. There were protests.
That seems to be the place that the federal secret police are mainly operating in.
Right. Okay.
From what I've heard, there are plans
I'm just
to send
wondering
them to
if-
Chicago as well.
I'm just wondering if things have died down a little bit globally.
Well, they will have died down in places because certain places will... I mean, there is a sort of an endurance thing there
Yeah.
where people will be spending, long nights outside,
Yeah. Yeah.
putting themselves at risk of coronavirus potentially, but
Yeah.
also meaning that they're at risk of violence or getting arrested.
Mm.
And also, it is a big... It's time-consuming going protesting as well.
Yeah. Mm.
And also, it's sort of... there it is sort of when you see that there's less coverage of these sort of things, that sort of gives you the impression that, oh, that means it's okay now. I can go back to normal.
It's a difficult one because, I mean, obviously, well, I'm not saying that it's easier to fight against something that's present in your area or in your life, but it's a more obvious thing that needs to be protested against. Whereas I would say in the kind of life that I lead, there are maybe subtle examples of racism that are kind of, they're not obvious. They're not like sort of, they're just kind of general attitude problems, really.
Yeah. Well, but I mean,
but I mean that's kind of what's pervasive, isn't it? That's what kind of feeds into the whole.
I mean, there's the sort of personal level of racism, which is an issue, definitely. But also, like, the systems within the UK government definitely are racist.
Yeah.
How they've handled the Windrush generation, the huge amount of scaremongering over immigrants and refugees, asylum seekers from war-torn places. But by the way, we had a fairly significant role in tearing up.
I can't remember where I was reading this, but it was in the last week or two, and it was an article from, it was a scientist, like researchers in population, what do you call it? Stuff.
Demographics.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Basically saying that that it looks like the population is starting to revert the population boom. It's slowing down.
Well, yeah, because medicine's generally getting better, so
but they kind of
have less kids.
Yeah, they kind of the way the statistics are going of the kind of birth rate in different countries and stuff is that they're projecting that it's likely to peak. The global population is likely to peak. I think it was like around about the middle of this century, at about 9 point something billion.
But the issue isn't that there's not enough to go around. The issue is that small segment of the population is having too much.
The point I was going to make is that when it starts coming down, there's going to be almost the reverse problem in that countries are going to be competing for immigrants because
we're having that now.
They're going to be kind of we
scaremonger about immigration so much, and it's like our country's built on their backs essentially.
Yeah.
Like without immigrant labour in this country, a lot of industries just plummet.
Yeah,
particularly the NHS. And a lot of agriculture and sort of picking of fruit, that's done by migrants for the most part.
I know back in the 80s, basically they must have done some kind of deal. They basically moved a whole load of Scots down to Corby. I think I mentioned it before.
Yeah.
Scottish community, if you like, for the steel industry. And of course, now they were all out of work once the steel industry kind of collapsed. So,
that's the thing. Like a lot of, I think it's something to do with the Bangladeshi and I think Indian governments were sort of wanting to incentivize people to become doctors, but also Britain needed doctors, and we still had ties with them. So I think a lot of South Asians were encouraged to move here to become doctors and support the NHS.
It's like a skills drain on their countries, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
but
they need like experts as well.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a place where nurses and doctors are treated worse than here, but yeah, in those places they would be paid probably worse, and it sort of would have been in their interest to move here, apart from all the racists then asking them to move out when they've been asked to come here.
Yeah, it's a weird time, and this whole virus thing happening when it has, and Brexit happening I mean, chances. Well, even if we get a vaccine, the earliest that it's going to be available is going to be next summer, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in the meantime, while all this is going on, we're kind of. It's almost like we're just kind of sleepwalking.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like
into Brexit, and just it's like
because people supposedly want this. Because we elected Tories with majority, even though a majority of people didn't vote for them. So therefore, Brexit has absolute support.
I had a thought. That was something news related. The Russia report.
Oh yes.
Now, can I just bring up one point about that? That it's been proved that the Russians had an influence and were meddling in the Scottish independence referendum and Brexit, obviously. But my initial thoughts about that was you'd have thought that they would be wanting to break up the UK, to weaken it.
Well, just because they influenced it doesn't mean that they necessarily caused whatever result was.
But that might
Brexit was by a narrow margin.
I kind of
could have easily gone the other way.
I kind of thought, well, they didn't succeed, but then afterwards, I'm thinking, well, maybe they did, because you got to think to yourself, the way things are going now, Brexit is happening. What is the most surefire way to guarantee that a country wants to leave is if they've been lied to? Do you know what I mean? Like, if Putin's playing a long game, his best bet would have been to have actually got
really
Scotland
the main
to
thing
stay
here
in the UK
is to basically polarize things within any referendum to basically make it as tight as possible. So Scotland's more divided. I don't think it had the effect quite as much as Brexit, particularly because I don't think there was so much of a sort of hatred of each other's side.
Wasn't it you that was telling me that there's now the rule of the 60-40 split?
Yeah, I don't know if they managed to get it through, but I imagine they would have because they're majority government. But it was actually the Conservatives proposing that for all future referendums, they have to be won by a 60-40 split for it to be legally binding.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure that means like if it was a 50.
But you know what I mean,
45 split, they could still act on it. It's just
what I mean, though. There couldn't have been a better way to drive Scotland to want to leave the UK than to get them to vote to stay in, so they could stay in Europe and then be forced to leave Europe against their will.
I think it's just sort of they want to sort of sow division and chaos wherever they can to make everything just more polarized. So. Well, people are busy tearing apart their own country whilst
he's basically given himself the opportunity to stay in power for 25 years now. So
yeah, well, you kind of expected that he would do that though, because it's fucking Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, but you sort of got to think when you look at the international climate, you got to think. I mean, if anyone's playing a blinder, he is.
What do you mean?
You might not agree with his politics, but he's definitely kind of leading the game, if you like. He's kind of everything's going how he wants it to at the moment.
Well, and this is something that was kind of came out in the Russia report that like nobody's really doing anything about it either.
No,
like. And I think this is because they knew that it would basically undermine their whole flagship policy. The Tories basically just refused to investigate it effectively or actually try to stop any sort of interference. They just flat out just didn't do anything about it. They knew full well because they've been talking about it with
but did they know
sort of
what
attempted assassination of Sergei Skripal?
But did they know what the meddling was trying to achieve?
They didn't bother investigating it, even though they knew it was there.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is if they had... I mean, the trouble is, whatever side you're on, if you think somebody's meddling, they might be meddling for the advantage of your side. Do you know what I mean? You're less likely to to go and investigate something if you think that it's going to damage your.
Well, given
side.
that Russian oligarchs have repeatedly been funding the Tories
Yeah.
and proponents of Brexit, it seems likely that they would be going for at least the Tories in the general election, if not Brexit on a wider scale. It just sort of seems like it would be in their interest to weaken the European Union as it's sort of their main geopolitical rival, I guess.
Yeah. It's so weird, isn't it? Weird situation. Oh dear.
Given that if they want to encroach on, say, the Baltic states, like, if the EU's weak, that sort of works in their favour. Although the UK is going to be significantly more weakened by this, which might actually be Russia's bigger aim there.
Yeah, it has been said recently that we're kind of their biggest political target.
Well, yeah, they've tried to assassinate and successfully assassinated quite a few people over the years here.
Have you got your buzzer on your phone?
I have, because people
That's
in my
so
Discord are talking to me.
unprofessional. I turned mine off.
Shut up, right.
Talk about something.
Sorry, there's people...
Talk about something. For the podcast audience.
Sorry.
Yeah, turn Discord off.
Fine, I'll turn off the notifications on that so that it's not bothering me. Just don't look at anything.
I can't see it anyway.
Of course not. And let's use the settings. You'll have to actually edit this.
No, I won't. You'll have to get more professional in future. This is ignorant.
Just for like
Ignorant of your audience.
Shut the fuck up, right?
That's ignorant.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know.
You're very helpful.
I didn't invite anyone on the show tonight because they're all ignorant too, and I'm too ignorant to invite them.
What is this?
I don't know.
Right.
What are you wanting to make it? Are you wanting to talk about something serious?
I'm wanting to talk about some sort of subject rather than just talking about something.
Okay. Yeah. Well, have we finished the news yet? We did the Russia report.
I mean, we're
kind of integrated
it with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe this is what's happening. This is what things are going to osmose in this direction in general.
Well, they're sort of talking about current events related to ignorance is quite useful. We should probably talk about coronavirus
breaking Bollocks
misinformation.
report.
Before we do, though, this isn't like me bragging or like saying I'm brilliant for this. It's just sort of raising awareness.
Put it away.
I have given $50, which is about £40. Their website's American, to the bail fund for the protests going on in America.
And how would anyone who wishes to do likewise achieve this?
I shall look up their website. Basically, it's paying for the legal fees of the people that have been dubiously arrested during these protests.
It's definitely a legitimate fund, yeah.
Yeah, it's one that's been, I've seen repeatedly promoted by people that are interested in helping this, so I'm assuming it's fine. There's a list here, there, but there's one that was sort of like a big one for everyone. Yeah, there's a big list here of things, but if I find the actual one.
I mean, we don't have to keep talking for 2 hours if we do end up struggling. That just seems to have become.
Just give me a sec.
a thing.
Got a link to it at all, though.
Maybe we should look this up another time.
No, I want to promote it so people know.
National Bail Fund.
This seems like it would be it. No, that wasn't the one that I got.
What was that BLM thing? There was a BLM.
It's the Seattle Freedom Fund.
All right.
There's various bail funds that you can. The Bail Project, that was it.
Okay. Bailproject.org.
I think this was it.
Seems to be taking a time to load.
Yeah, so is this the one that I was on? Yeah,
I
this
don't
was
know.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, the Bail Project, that's it.
Freedom should be free.
I mean, that was the thing that I donate to. There's various things that you can donate to if you're interested in giving money if you're not able to go out to protest. I mean, I think there probably are protests locally. However, I think it would be probably more effective using the limited funds that I have to sort of try help people in America, because that's where the majority of the protests are going on. And they're being unfairly prosecuted for...
What for? I mean, I don't know what
For
the...
protest. I mean, see, this is the thing, and I think there are actually laws potentially in the US for this. The thing that a lot of people are calling them out for, I mean, initially it was like vandalism or violence, and like, for the most part, though, protesters haven't been doing that, and to actually arrest them for that, you'd have to prove that you have probable cause to arrest them for that. Most of the protests have been pretty peaceful until police have gotten involved and escalated it.
Yeah.
And still a lot of them have maintained being peaceful despite that.
Well, this is one of the big problems that Extinction Rebellion came up against, isn't it? That once you get to a certain point...
well, yeah, and then they're sort of like,
moving.
Oh, well, you're blocking traffic. With Extinction Rebellion, that was the point.
Yeah, yeah. They start changing the law, basically, to kind of entrap you. And that's this guy.
Yeah.
Have you heard George Monbiot?
No.
He's a journalist. I think he writes for The Guardian sometimes.
Okay.
But he was one of the he took part in those protests, and he often writes some really interesting articles about injustice and stuff. Well worth a look. It's spelt Monbiot. George Monbiot. He got himself arrested in the Extinction Rebellion protests last year.
Weekly column for The Guardian.
Yeah.
Known for environmental and political activism.
Indeed.
Was there any particular reason beyond Extinction Rebellion that you're mentioning him?
No.
Well, I guess it sort of makes a sort of wider point, is that like journalists as well as sort of regular activists are being arrested here, which raises a lot of red flags for like authoritarianism when journalists are being cracked down on here.
Well, yeah, I mean, he didn't do anything. It's the whole
Most
point.
of them didn't do anything illegal because they were trained not to.
Yeah, but then there is an aspect of it which is basically putting yourself up for arrest by doing something which technically breaks the law, but you're not. It's non-violent protest, but it's kind of it's that kind of the sort of thing that Gandhi used to do, which is basically just refusing to comply. Rather than actually being violent or doing.
That's the thing with
kind of if a law is unjust,
Yeah.
then than just refusing
Well,
to
there's that
comply with it.
aspect of it, but then, and this has been something that has gotten, I think, a lot of people in trouble, particularly like disproportionately based on race, where a police officer will try and arrest someone without real, like, probable cause to do so, or it'll be for something quite frivolous, and then they'll get a worse charge and potentially jail time for resisting arrest. And it's that sort of thing. It's sort of like, well, if you're resisting arrest and you haven't done anything wrong, then surely that should just be like, you're just defending yourself from someone prosecuting you as an innocent person.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, if you're violent about it, then maybe, but like, a lot of the time it's just like refusal to comply.
Yeah, and I think this is where it kind of becomes a difference between, because some people are kind of in love with the system, aren't they? They trust the system.
Well, yeah, and then they're like, oh, well, if you just comply with it, then you'll be fine, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you won't,
there doesn't seem
because
to
they've
be,
had this so many times.
There doesn't seem to be an understanding that a system can be corrupt.
Yeah.
There seems to be an implicit trust that because it's the system, it must be right.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of people don't realise that that's the case because they haven't fallen foul of it yet.
I've had this sort of with people arguing sort of, if something's a law, oh, well, you should obey that because it's, I mean, you'll get some people that's like, it's law, you should obey it. And sort of, for consequential reasons, you can sort of get that, but like if the law's actually unjust, and then they'll go on to say, oh, well, if it's the law, that suggests that most of society thinks that's how it should be. Not that most society isn't always correct as well, because you get a lot of democratic systems persecuting people, like America.
Yeah.
It's just a sort of blind trust in the system, and then people go, okay, well, we should change that by reform. And then it's sort of like, but that's operating within the system to change the system, and it sort of feels like, well, that's just going to end up with the same problem as every other time it's tried to be reformed.
I mean, maybe we, as a society, we should be turning this whole concept on its head of there is the point that ignorance isn't a defense in law, is it? Just because you don't know that something's illegal, it can't be used as a defense. So maybe we should be applying the same logic to ignorance of whether or not something is just, even if it is a law, should be upheld. So I mean, if a law is unjust, then ignorance of the fact that it's unjust shouldn't be a defense.
Yeah, I guess sort of as a sort of moral defense, but it's sort of like, if you're talking about actually like within a political system or a legal system,
you can't. I mean, I think in essence, you have to live by moral rules, because you can't practically do the legal thing and keep your head intact, because 100 yards down the road across the border, the same thing could be legal.
Well, yeah, especially in America, because each state has like weird different laws, and also like people have been arrested for like not following like a specific malls or like a restaurant's like policies, which is like, that shouldn't be punishable by law. That should just be like.
But
I guess
you see,
depending on how they're enforced, like the owner could like say to just get out, and then at that point,
the problem is you can still adhere to that proposal that the law is inherently just and should be followed.
Well, yeah,
if you subscribe to territorialism or nationalism, because what's right in one state or in one country and not in another is right for that state. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's the sort of thing that states sort of the sort of mentality that the sort of states' rights thing has in America. It's sort of like, well, hang on, if the law's meant to be informed in any way by morality, shouldn't it be the same everywhere, rather than being subject to different people's opinions depending in which state they live.
But people don't, or a lot of people don't tend to think that humanity can have a moral code of its own, that it can make its own up, that would work as a blanket thing everywhere.
Well, not as a blanket thing, but I think that's the thing with sort of any sort of broad statement or law about people. It's sort of like there will always be exceptions there. It's sort of like where there'll be examples where there's there'll be times when a different approach is appropriate. If you get what I mean.
The problem I have is that, and it doesn't seem to work this way, is that any country or state or area that has a system of law, that system has a responsibility to all its citizens. And if some are treated more better than others or worse than others because of something that's different about them, then that's a failure in the responsibility of that system.
Yeah, but it's also worth noting in this is that in America, but also I think in Britain, that felons don't get the right to vote. So the people that are actually supposedly breaking these laws, that you would think would have the most actual stake.
I strongly disagree with prisoners not being allowed to vote.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like, it feels obvious, but a lot of people are like, well, do you want murderers to vote? And it's like, well, yeah, I want murderers to be equal to me. Because then if I murder someone for just reasons or not, I want to still have my rights. It's like, I don't think anyone's rights should just be waived because they've done something terrible.
Well, it's the whole point of like punishment is kind of, I mean, they talk about it's taking away somebody's democratic freedoms, if you like, and it's part of their freedom is that
there should be some basic rights there.
Yeah, because
they're seen as privileges.
The only way that something like that can work is if you have an infallible justice system, which nobody has.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like with the death penalty, which is sort of the highest sort of, I guess, confidence in your justice system if you're willing to actually kill people as a form of punishment. But like that has a roughly 4% chance of executing an innocent person.
Well, the other point
which seems too high.
If somebody's in prison, not just for murder, but for any crime, they surely have the most insight of anyone in society about what conditions drive people to crime. So is it not their vote that we should be listening to the most? Because they're the ones that know what drove them to where they've ended up.
Particularly with America, because I think it has one of the highest prisoner populations in the world. Because they have this idea.
Business there, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there's the business aspect of it, but it's the war on drugs, it's the war on terror, and it's just sort of this idea of, oh, well, it's war, so then we can...
I was thinking this about alcohol.
Get rid of their rights.
Do you think alcohol is like the white person's drug? I don't mean like completely. I suppose I mean the respectable drug, if you like, the one that society kind of
it sort of
promotes and thinks
worth
is okay.
noting, like while marijuana is sort of demonized, and the origins of that were to basically drum up fear around Mexicans.
Yeah, there's fuck all wrong with it. The worst thing about it is smoking it.
Yeah, it causes less deaths. I don't think actually like any deaths have been specifically linked to marijuana itself. It's the smoking it that might cause harm there, but like...
Oh yeah, and there's severe problems that respiratory problems that you can have from bronchial.
No worse than tobacco.
No. Well, it's a difficult one. I mean, I know from experience that you do get a much harsher effect because you're not getting any kind of filtering and you've got hot oils kind of in the vapors.
But
and stuff.
far more deaths have been linked
but the chemical
to
itself,
than
yeah.
marijuana.
Yeah, there's been no deaths that I know of linked to marijuana. Although I did when I used to smoke myself, I did hear a funny story about there's only ever been one death, and that was somebody who giggled themselves to death. But yeah.
But then that's the weird thing as well. People will be very quick to demonize, say, someone who's quite poor, who's like resulted to either using drugs or selling them perhaps to get out of that situation. And it's sort of like can be I don't know. I've never done drugs. If you can't tell,
you're doing them now. You're drinking.
Well, I've never done illegal.
You drink coffee
drugs.
all the time.
I've never done legal drugs, or I'm not really aware of the sort of things around that, I guess. But the point that I'm making is sort of like a fair amount of our own government's cabinet has admitted to doing drugs, illegal drugs that are illegal in the UK. Like
the dangerous aspect of it is the reasons that you're doing something and the extent to which it affects your daily life. But that's the same with anything.
What I mean is sort of like our politicians, and it's quite famous that like a lot of sort of celebrities.
We know for a fact, though, that the politicians don't live by their own kind of mantras.
No, they change them to basically fit them.
Yeah, it's like one rule for us and one for them.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like that. It is like, well, yeah, I'm not making sense. Pardon me.
Well, yeah, that was the sort of thing with, I mean, they were talking...
heard anything about him for a while, have we?
Who?
Dominic Cummings.
Yeah. Probably because they've instructed him to put his head in the sand until it's okay for him to come out as a PR move.
Yeah, because that happened with Jacob Rees-Mogg for a while, didn't it?
Yeah, basically he said something stupid about Grenfell, which was entirely something that like the Tories could have avoided with better policies.
So basically, like when you say something stupid, just put your head in the sand for a while.
Well, yeah,
wait for it to blow over.
It's all about. They don't see it as any sort of thing to make the world better. They just want to further their own personal ambitions, which means sometimes, if they say something stupid for PR reasons to elect them and get them further, they have to basically just
I don't understand
go under the radar.
I mean, I don't understand to what end, like what benefit they get from it, because it's like, I mean, it must be
tons of money and
contracts. I know, but it must be a shitload of work. I mean,
they're raised to do it. I mean, Theresa May basically gave her husband a load of fracking contracts when she was in charge.
But I mean,
Boris Johnson, obviously.
See, when you've got that much money, do you just like pay other people to do the work? Because I mean, it's difficult enough keeping a part-time job in a,
Well, they get paid by billionaires to make it easier for the billionaires. Most of them aren't actually that rich as the billionaires, but they can still live comfortably as they are millionaires. Millionaires paid by billionaires to screw over people in poverty, essentially, or various people.
Do you think, I mean, like, we know what the inequalities are in the world in terms of ridiculous amounts of money in some people's pockets and nothing in others. Do you think there's enough money?
I mean, I think we're conceptually aware of it, but then when you see how much exactly it is, it's surprising.
Money for everyone in the world to have our standard of living.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what's the world economy?
Because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like you kind of you're made to feel as though you've got something to be guilty about because you have your little luxuries. We've got our laptops and our TVs and our Netflix and all that.
Yeah, but we don't have private jets and it was ridiculous. For some reason, I watch a lot of travel shows right now. I've been watching.
Maybe because you
Richard
don't actually travel at all.
Iowa
Not even out of the front door.
Travel Man, and they went to the UAE, which is just sort of like the pinnacle of like ridiculous luxury.
Burj Khalifa's fucking scary.
Yeah, but like the hotel that they were staying at is like the rooms were thousands of pounds per night, and they had like a aquarium with thousands of fish in it.
Yeah, and you're just like, yeah. But what I was saying was, it's scary that there are enough rich people in the world to keep places like that going. You know, to basically have people in those suites and rooms most of the time. It's scary. I mean, you think like if you think back to, when we went on holiday a couple of years ago, and we splashed out and spent 2 nights in a hotel on Times Square. We didn't have like a posh suite or anything. It was a basic room. It wasn't any better than you get in a Premier Inn, really. It was just where it was. But think of the size of that hotel, and the fact that it must be pretty much sold out all the time. And that's just one hotel in the New York. And you think, there's that many people that have got that much money. What are you doing with your calculator?
Yeah, basically, there's enough money in the global economy for everyone. If everyone had money divvied out to them equally, about 11,000 per year.
Pounds?
Dollars. It's not a huge amount, but like...
No.
I don't think our standard of living is that much different from that. I don't know our personal finances that much.
That's quite a lot less than we need to sustain ourselves a year.
But someone actually, because if you don't know, basically Jeff Bezos is the richest guy in the world by quite a long way, and quite recently he made records by making 13 billion in one day, which is the most anyone's ever made in 24 hours.
Sorry, I'm going to change that because I forget that we're more than one person. So, like, if saying each person, like in our house at the moment,
we would have
be like $33,000.
Yeah.
That's probably quite close then to our standard of living.
Yeah, and that seems like I know we're not brilliantly well off, but like when you see the people at like the heights of luxury, and as I'm about to go into Jeff Bezos, I'll try and find the Twitter thread on what he could basically pay for with the amount that he's got and still be a billionaire.
While you're seeing about that, I'm going to start up the other camera just in case, because you know what happens? It just goes... Say something, because I'm making myself sound ridiculous.
Well, we can just edit it out here.
I'm not editing.
You can't ever be arsed.
It's not that. It's a practical time. You want episodes to actually go out, then no editing can take place. For me. Bibbidi bobbidi boo. Do you know, I just thought one of the cameras was switching off then, but I was wrong. What are you looking for?
I'm trying to find a thread of all the things Jeff Bezos could buy and still be a billionaire.
Well, I'm sure that's... was it you that was saying that he earned 13 billion in one day?
Yeah, I just said that like 5 minutes ago.
Did you?
Yeah.
It wasn't 5 minutes ago. I'm sure it wasn't 5 minutes ago.
Thereabouts. But basically, he could... there's someone crunched the numbers. I can't find it right now. If I look up his net worth...
Hey, Baba!
Yeah, $180 billion.
But what? Why? I don't get it. I don't understand what the point is of that.
And a lot of people defend him by like saying, "Oh well, he had this great idea and he did loads of hard work." It's like, no, he exploited his workers to shit, and then exploited a bunch of other people. Got quite lucky, if we're honest, and probably had some money to start with. I don't actually know, but like, basically, he could solve world hunger, and this is just on his own. There are plenty of other billionaires that could do this too. Solve malaria, solve AIDS, all of that. Still think being the richest guy in the world. After that, he could buy the whole Premier League. I imagine he could just buy up the Burj Khalifa if he fancied it. Buy 10 fighter jets if he fancied it. Bunch of Bugattis if he wanted. A bunch of it. He could buy basically anything in the world for that amount of money. Could buy up Richard Branson's island as well. Plus another few islands probably.
But that's what I mean. What's the point? What?
To get high score, I don't know. Like, he's not spending.
Is that what it is? It's just like getting the highest score in The Sims or something.
He's just a fucking sociopath, I think. I don't.
Oh, I never thought of that.
I just don't see how anyone could ever. I mean, he's not spending it.
I tell you one thing that he is, that I do know that he is. He is a product of capitalism.
Yeah, but he's also
as
a
are we all.
significant proprietor of it. So, while we may shop on Amazon and that might have some minuscule percentile,
but that's the thing, isn't it?
Of Amazon's negative impact on the world.
But you know, it's like the snowflakes causing an avalanche, isn't it? It's like none of us can make a difference on our own.
Yeah, but like if he himself just stopped just accumulating wealth and saving it up for, I don't know, like a money swimming pool like Scrooge McDuck or something, he could solve so many things. All by himself. Yeah. 13 billion in one day. I'll just quickly calculate what that means he was making per second that day. Because I'm getting the calculator out today.
But I wonder what goes on inside your head though when you've got that kind of money coming in. Like, you know, it can't not mess with your conception of reality. Like, you know, to have anything and everything at your fingertips and to know that there are millions of people who have nothing, it must just mean nothing. Like reality, the whole of just, you know, what does it mean?
That day that he was making 13 billion in a single day, he was making about 150,000 per second.
Yeah. But do you know what I mean? It's like when you're talking about that kind of...
That's potentially more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime.
But it's like that difference just between him and us, but also between us and the poorest people. Yeah, I know. But I mean, how everyone's reality is different. You've got to start questioning everything when you're trying to work out some kind of moral code, which I think is what we've been sort of talking about. How do you get through to someone who lives so differently that you can't even comprehend what it's like to be in their shoes? How do you?
I would never find myself in his shoes because I'm not a fucking monster.
No, but born with the same...
He wasn't born with that.
No, but what I'm saying is...
He deliberately exploited people to get that and then refused to give it away.
But what caused him to do that is what because I mean, if not him, somebody else would. So the important thing is, what is it about him and his situation that has led him to do what he's done to get that rich? Because I think one of the most dangerous things that anyone can do is to say, I would never do something, because you don't know unless you
I would never find myself in the position to do that.
not from where you are now, but if you were born him, you would.
Would I?
Yes, if you were born him, if you had his DNA, his parents, his environment, you would do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but that's not me, is it?
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. How do you get through to somebody who's not you, who lives that different a reality? You know, I mean, we spend all our time, not all our time, but we spend a lot of our time trying to work out what the hell it's all about. We're doing that from our perspective. How the hell would somebody in his position be trying to work out what it's all about? You know, what? I'm trying to get inside his head. I'm trying to think, do you think he likes himself?
He was actually apparently... his mother was a high school student when he was born, and his dad owned a bike shop, so not particularly rich. They divorced.
Well, I mean, Amazon was basically a book shop originally, wasn't it, online?
But like, he's deliberately throughout that underpaid his employees and overworked them, as well as a number of other things where like he could very easily use his money for greater good, and then just gone, nope, I just want all this for... It's literally more money than you could ever spend.
There's a difficult a conundrum to kind of get your head around, though, because you could argue from a capitalist viewpoint that he wouldn't have got to the position where he's earning 13 billion in one day if he hadn't exploited people. And that happens with nations. You know, nations are built on slavery, you know, through exploiting people. So you can say that he should be redistributing that wealth now. But if he hadn't exploited people, would he have had that wealth to have the opportunity to redistribute? It's almost like you've got to be a cunt to become capable of being that good to everyone. But
yeah,
but you can't then. But like, he's not going to turn around and change now.
No one good ever.
No one good makes it, do they?
No, I mean, none of the billionaires in the world actually contribute that much of value other than their own dosh, which they refuse to contribute that effectively. Aside from maybe Bill Gates,
so that's
you have to rely on the personal goodness of them, and relying on that from billionaires.
You can't get to that
is
position
a
if you
losing
haven't got that. Yeah. You've got to be a cunt to get to that position.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically to amass that much personal wealth, and this isn't just their company. Sure, they could be cutthroat in the business world and get their company ahead while still paying their own employees well, but to get that much personal wealth just for you, you have to be a fucking colossal arsehole. And he is way above anyone else in wealth.
Okay, so we've ascertained that arseholes are in charge of the world.
Yes.
It's kind of...
By the way, his...
It's like, what the fuck... What can we do about it?
His net worth, if he decided to found a country, would himself put him...
this is not helping...
above the economy of
We're not
Algeria,
actually discussing this,
the
though.
53rd richest country in the world.
Yeah.
And that's just one guy.
But we're not actually discussing what we can do about it and what the average person can...
I mean, I guess educate yourself so you don't keep falling for the trap of them saying like, oh, well, the billionaires are good guys, and it's like, and then they refuse to tax them.
Spend less?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, spend what you need to spend, I guess, but like...
Needs a relative term, though, isn't it?
I guess... What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, this whole kind of eat out to help out thing, it's like, at the end of the day, who are you helping? I mean, they're trying to make it now about helping the people whose jobs rely on, like the waiters and waitresses, the cooks, and the people who work in the food industry.
Yeah, but basically, you're putting those people that work in the food industry at risk by forcing them to work, and also the patrons, but the people that are working would be at more risk there.
Yeah, but the government are kind of doing that now so that they can stop having to pay the furloughed workers, if you like, over time.
I mean, Denmark, I think,
There is
had
an
the idea
economy
of
thing, isn't
basically to help us through this crisis, and it seems completely reasonable. Don't know why more people weren't doing that before, to basically say, okay, we'll keep paying this, but can the billionaires that are benefiting off of Denmark's government as well? That's the thing, like, in terms of taxes, the government's paving the roads that their trucks go on.
I think a good start would be this basic income thing. What's it called?
Universal basic income.
Yeah, I think that would be a good start.
Well, it would just sort of be good, and it sort of helps people in a situation of poverty to basically have that base foundation that they know that they can do new things without having to worry about literally starving or going onto the street. And it's more efficient than most other welfare programs, from what I've heard. Because it doesn't require you to have certain conditions.
See,
it just gives.
We look back at history and we look at things like Dickensian Britain and how unfair that was, and there was the aristocracy and people suffering and in poverty and that. Has anything really changed? It might be different environments that it's happening in, but
the amount of inequality, I think, has actually increased. It's just that sort of like, I guess, sort of the base level of poverty is sort of more survivable, at least in the UK. Right.
So, like the average kind of, I mean, because there is that argument in capitalism, isn't there, that the high tide raises all boats, kind of. That.
Yeah, but that's just fucking trickle down economics, which has been disproven far too many fucking times.
Yeah.
Ooh, I just remembered something to talk about, so we can stop being depressed about billionaires exploiting their workers and be depressed about a billionaire exploiting a minority.
Okay, go on then.
If you remember, I think I raised it last week, J.K. Rowling
fucking hell,
being a cunt about just being a transphobic cunt.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I don't... Is libel what's in print?
One of them, libel's in print, slanders when you say it.
Now, okay, well, I'm now guilty of slander. I'll be hearing from her lawyers. But basically, a children's website, which is sort of, I think it's like a news website. I can't remember what it's called. Just look it up.
If you're talking about, have you posted something online?
No, basically, she, children's news websites, The Day, was forced to apologise to J.K. Rowling because basically they, in their news thing, I think, called her a deeply unpleasant person. Now that seems fairly obvious, and I think it's correct, but it seems fairly obvious that that's an opinion, regardless of its validity.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds clearly editorial.
Exactly. However, she still... with her millions, possibly billion, basically sent her legal team to deal with that, to basically say, oh, you're not allowed to say that about me. Which is funny, because literally, I think less than 2 weeks before that, she was signing a letter calling for...
The thing is, though...
free speech.
She's essentially a brand now, isn't she? She's, I mean, like you said, it's her lawyers that have kind of got onto this, but she's, I mean, she has lots of money, yeah, but she's kind of a name. Do you know what I mean? She's a possession of capitalism now. She's she doesn't have reality on her side anymore.
Well, no, not when she's
Normal life,
just
you know.
promoting lies about trans people, which is either A, she's ignorant, which she herself has claimed that she's looked into the subject, so either she's ignorant and just wants to present that she's not to make it seem like she has more credence here, or like she's willfully ignoring what she's seen that's actually representing the truth, or she's misrepresenting her actual views on things, which seems a bit like a far stretch considering she's a best-selling author and you'd expect her to be able to write her own ideas out effectively, or she's deliberately transphobic here.
Who knows?
I think she's probably deliberately transphobic based on a number of things I've seen, but I mean, I can't know. I don't know her personally, but it's sort of, I think people are sort of using her as an excuse to basically be transphobic. I mean, actual lawmakers have used her writings on this issue to make transphobic laws.
Like what?
In America, there was a senator that basically used her arguments, saying, "Oh, look, it's J.K. Rowling. What a smart person," to further their own transphobic legislation. So it has a real impact beyond just saying what you think, because she has a platform and it is quite influential, especially with that much money.
Yeah, the more I see of people with loads of money and wealth, the less I actually want to be rich and famous. The more I just want. I mean, like, as long as you're comfortable, I think your best bet is to just kind of avoid it at all costs, because you're gonna just have a shit life.
It seemed like, I mean, I remember before he started sort of going off the wall, a lot of people compared Elon Musk to like Tony Stark, which is
he thinks he's Tony Stark.
Well, yeah, it's like Tony Stark if he didn't actually have any character development from the first movie.
Yeah.
Or sort of then comparing him to Lex Luthor instead, like a supervillain genius. And it's sort of like, okay, while they might have some sort of intelligence or business sense to get to where they are, it's like, none of these guys are like geniuses or actually contribute that much of value necessarily. Like, it's disproportionate what they've got compared to what they've contributed. Like,
yeah, you gotta quantify value then, though.
I don't think Albert Einstein was a billionaire.
Wasn't he? What was he? Wasn't he like I can't remember. He was something.
Very helpful.
Was he like a bookstore clerk or something? I don't know. He was
before he sort of became famous off of his theories. He, I think, was a patent clerk in Switzerland somewhere, maybe Geneva.
I knew Clark was in there somewhere. No, spelt clerk, but it's Clark.
Whatever. Language is fluid, therefore I can pronounce anything like I want.
So is my urine, and I need to eject some.
Oh. But basically, the point that, I mean, one point I'm making here is J.K. Rowling still a cunt, but also...
she has one.
Well,
possibly.
but basically, and a lot of the sort of and I think it is ignorance here. I mean, it's hard to see whether it's ignorance or, like we say, sort of just like not knowing and being misled, or people are seeing what they want to see and then just being deliberately a dickhead about it to a group that's already so
I just think she's just trying to cope like everybody else with the bullshit that is modern day society.
What?
I just think she's just succumbing to the same kind of just panicking, trying to like I don't know. She's just being a fucking idiot, like most people.
Yeah, but it's like I mean, she sort of claimed that the reason that she was doing the research that she was doing was because she was writing a book series. I don't know if that had anything to do with trans people and that's why, but like, I guess maybe. But like,
I just don't like the world.
no.
I mean, it's difficult to. This is one of the reasons why I am desperately trying to reduce my media intake. As I say, I'm still occasionally dipping into the news, maybe once a day, just seeing what the headlines are. But in general, social media and general media online, just the general bullshit that's that society's just gone mad. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's this whole shit that's being played out online.
Convenient narrative there to basically go, oh well, that's the world's crazy. Let me handle it. Essentially, just ignore it. We'll just get on with actually sorting it out from governments and stuff. It just basically plays into the system to basically ignore injustices in the world.
One of the problems is that, I mean, we've all kind of got a problem. I was going to say a responsibility, but a problem of dealing with this on a mental health level.
There's a certain point at which it becomes counterproductive to be.
I would love to be able
so
to
much without doing something about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, if it's just making you feel like shit, there's a certain point there where, like,
somebody like me, for instance, if consuming all of this bullshit online and on TV, if it debilitates me and prevents me from being able to do the good that I am able to do, which is perhaps to become a teacher or to write music and give the best of what I've got to give, whether or not it makes me money, because I as long as I've got enough to live on, I really don't care. But the best that I've got to be mentally in a good place to be able to give that. And it's almost like if I'm succumbing to all the bullshit that's being fed me and it's preventing me from giving the best of myself back, then that's my part of the war that I'm losing, really. In some ways, the only way I can really effect change from my standpoint and give the best of what I can give in terms of education or art is to look after my own mental health. Take in the necessary amount, but just you've got to be on. I'm not saying shut yourself off completely and become a hermit, but I think most of us really do need to be careful and think about what we're taking in.
Because there is like a balance to strike there between
definitely
keeping yourself informed and I guess sort of keeping yourself sane.
Yeah, but it's a very difficult tightrope, a very difficult balance, because it's so easy to get sucked in.
The modern world, I guess, but like
I feel like I at the moment have to err on the conservative side, and I mean, like, I would rather be slightly underinformed than risk falling back into just getting all the bile and stuff again. Because I'm happy with my politics, if you like.
Right.
Obviously, I would be extremely concerned. We are dipping into actual deliberate ignorance to a certain level, I suppose. Here is that I want to determine the amount that I need to know to get the best out of my own life and to give the best to other people that I have to give. There's no use me being, really well informed about everything that's going on if it destroys me and I can't do anything to help. Whereas if I can affect one person, if I can save one person's life, if I can inspire one person by being healthy myself.
Funny, I guess, sort of scene in, I think it's...
And that's exactly what you were saying about the revolution being inside, starting with yourself.
Yeah. There's a funny scene, I think it's in Restaurant at the End of the Universe, where Zaphod Beeblebrox, president of the galaxy, goes into this sort of machine intended to show you the full scope of the universe and its massive sort of implications of like just how big and unending it is. And most of the people that go into it just sort of collapse because there's too much information there.
Yeah.
And well, the too much information, but also too much just horror there. And then say for Beeblebrox goes into it, and he's just so shit-headed and confident that like he just survives it somehow, and it just baffles the makers of it. It's just like,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I want to know if people are being mistreated. And I want to know if people are being bombed unfairly. Well, at all.
There's a certain point where it becomes overwhelming. But
yeah.
I mean, I think
sometimes... I think probably the most important part of being able to cope with modern life is to be able to look at your own current state and determine what is a safe level of intake for you, because there may well be a time where you just cannot take any more. Some people might need to just like completely go into retreat. People go away to kind of
I've definitely
just
found
cut
that,
themselves off for a week or two or a month or whatever, just to be able to recover from the onslaught.
I do find it quite depressing. The J.K. Rowling, I'm quite a big fan of Harry Potter. Like,
yeah, me
and
too.
a lot of LGBT people are, and they've sort of found solace in that. So it's really disappointing to see this and see that it's not just like, oh, she's just old and doesn't really understand the new. Like, she's repeatedly doing this and being quite deliberately against reality.
I think the shame is as well that like as soon as something like this happens, you can't separate the author from the art in the sense that everything that she's written has come from within herself, and those attitudes will be in there as well. So now all of those people that feel slighted by what she said are going to have the experience of those books tainted by possibly going back, and next time they read them, if they do read them again, they'll be looking for evidence of prejudice.
Well, like, I own a fair amount of... we own, sort of as a family, a fair amount of stuff with Hogwarts houses on them.
Yeah.
I had to check because I do actually have like Hogwarts socks if I was wearing any right now.
Well, I've got my Gryffindor beer mat.
Yeah, I've got a Hufflepuff beer mat right here. So every time I see that, I just sort of remember...
But that whole idea of people being sorted into houses...
the person who created this just has just a shitty impact on the world now.
But there is another way of looking at it.
It's just sort of... It just reminds me that the world's shit every time I see it now. Even though I like the series.
There is another way of looking at it, though, that art really can't help but be pure once it's been created, because even if there is that whole questionable aspect of people being sorted into categories at such an early age and then having those characteristics kind of imposed upon them, even if that kind of prospect is a disturbing one, it's something which you kind of, when you're seeing it, when you're reading it, you're kind of being exposed to it, and you're having to make your own judgments about that.
There was always the thing in that of like people, and this is about the sorting hat, by the way, if you're not aware of Harry Potter, that sorts you into houses, where there's this sort of concept of, well, you can always basically choose to go into another house if they get it wrong.
Yeah, but my problem is,
and it sort of
that
felt
once
like
that choice is made,
the person writing that.
Can you then change?
You should be able to, but I mean, I guess it is a kid's book, so it can't be too.
There's lots of concepts, I suppose. I mean, there's the whole idea that I suppose some people would. I mean, and it plays with it definitely with Snape, but also there'll be a certain amount of people that can look at
that fucking redemption arc. Sorry,
You
this
don't
is just
think
me
so?
being no.
Well, there is
Because basically the only reason he did anything is because he wanted to get his dick wet with Lily.
There's an argument that it wasn't a redemption arc, that he was never the character that he was assumed to be. He was misunderstood.
He basically joined the wizard Nazis and bullied kids because he got rejected when he was a teenager. Sorry, if you don't know about Harry Potter, this seems probably a bit off, but...
Have you been rejected as a teenager?
Yes.
So how do you know how that's going to affect you?
Well, because it had gone through... I don't know.
You haven't gone through it, you're still a teenager.
What?
Well, what I'm trying to say is I know from my own life that there are things that I've done that I really wish that I hadn't. But I can see
it's
where...
not joining the wizard Nazis and spying for them and bullying children.
No, but it's as bad.
Really?
I've bullied people.
Yeah, but not like as a teacher.
No, I suppose not.
Not to the point where, when asked, when sort of confronted with their biggest fear, you're what comes up.
No, I suppose not. But you know what I mean. We've all, when you've been alive for long enough, you can always look at something that you've done that you think like that was really a wrong thing to do. But you have to accept yourself. You've kind of got to look at maybe the reasons that you might have done something. You know, the things that might have led you to where you.
Yeah, I mean, I've done bad things, but like
what?
Fuck. Well, in response to or around that person rejecting me, I was a dick a few times there and did some things that I'm not really... I mean, it wasn't the worst thing because it was sort of a thing where like it was... I think it was bad both ways, but like I definitely did said some regrettable things.
Yeah. You know what I mean, though? I mean, no situation's black and white is what I'm trying to say. I mean, you say you it was quite revealing that you said that basically he wanted to get his dick wet. For me, towards the end of that, it was, I mean, it was like he was in love.
Yeah, but like for decades, like after, like, like people move on and live their lives.
Yeah, well, they try and are successful sometimes and not at others, but it has effects, is what I'm saying. It doesn't. It kind of. At the end of the day, there's always two or more paths to take. You know, I mean, he could have carried on being a wizard Nazi and just basically been the bad guy to the end. I'm not saying that he was always good. I'm just saying in the end he made the right decision.
I guess.
Do you know, a bit like Darth Vader.
Yeah. See, I mean, I think a lot of people, particularly with like the sequel trilogy, although the last one was just bad, in all honesty.
What the last Star Episode 9?
Yeah.
Did you think?
Not at the time of watching it, but like looking back at how it like related to The Last Jedi, then yes.
Looking back with the benefit of all the stuff that you've read about it.
Well, looking at actual looking at it critically rather than just as an excited person just watching it at midnight. As it came out.
I get what you mean, but for me, it really pisses me off the number of people that I hear talking negatively about films and stuff, almost for the sake of it. And
I guess it's sort of like,
for me, it's like, make an effort to enjoy it. It's like, it doesn't have to be.
Well, there's, I guess, sort of two aspects to that, where like there are many films that like I could absolutely say are like, critically it doesn't really hold up to much scrutiny, but like it's fun anyway.
Yeah, it's like
I still
at the end of the day,
watching
it's a piece of art. It's really down to whether or not you want to enjoy it.
There are some things that are just so bad, like you just sort of, it just becomes sort of funny watching it sometimes, because like you get taken out of that experience by like how weird it is.
Again, that's going to be subjective, though, isn't it?
Because
I'm kind of the opinion more and more nowadays that there's no such thing as bad art.
Yeah, which is why I never take your film suggestions as anything worth listening to.
No, but at the end of the day, I get so much more enjoyment out of that attitude.
That's fair, but like still, like, if you're a discerning viewer and you're looking for
what is it you're
watch,
trying to discern?
Well, I guess it's like if you only are watching like a limited number of films, it's like, and you're looking for something to watch, it's sort of like, oh, well, this one's good.
It depends what you want from it, though. I mean, like, are you wanting, if you're choosing a film, are you wanting to get the most enjoyment out of your couple of hours, or are you wanting to know that you've seen something that's regarded as one of the best films ever made?
Well, the sort of person that reads reviews probably would be looking for the higher quality stuff, I guess.
Because I mean, I hear a lot of people talking about a lot of different sort of TV shows and music and films and stuff like that.
Subjectively higher quality.
Yeah, I to a certain extent I kind of understand, but really that the majority of the time, I just cannot fathom what criteria people are judging things under. Because I hear people saying that this TV show or this film is shit, or it's. I genuinely can't. I don't know if it's. I'm just lucky that I'm not as fussy as most people, but I just can't. It's just a case of whether or not, because I can watch the same film one day and hate it and the next day love it. And I know for a fact that that's not because of anything about the film. It's to do with me and what's going on in my life at the time.
I guess, but like...
it's about bringing your own attitude to it.
There are definitely films that you sort of like, oh, that was good, that was okay, I had fun with that. And then you're like, films like, oh, yeah, fuck me, that made me, that changed me. Like,
right.
There's films like I watch and sort of be like, that was funny, and it sort of, for those 2 hours or so, like, I'll be entertained or distracted, but like, I won't really think of it beyond that.
Mm.
And then there are films that like affect you and affect the culture around you and make a change and or say something meaningful.
I suppose I just don't really understand critics. I don't trust them. I don't get them. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I don't know.
Everyone's different sort of at the end of the day. My preference is to
in this
try to enjoy everything.
Capitalist society where you might only have money to see certain things at the cinema or time to see certain things at the cinema, having an idea of what's generally better regarded might give you an idea of where to put your money. Because it's like,
it's a very.
I would be interested in seeing Fast and Furious 9 or whatever they're on now, because partly because I haven't really watched most of the films before that, but like,
Fast and Furious is a prime example of something which is utter shit. Really, it's just that you can put your brain away for a couple of hours and it's just good fun action kind of you know, there's no brain material.
It doesn't try and fail to say anything meaningful.
No, it does exactly what it sets out to do. But then there are films which have bombed. You know, one of the worst performing films of all time. I've heard one of the most critical people of movies describe as absolutely brilliant.
Definitely.
Did you ever see Speed Racer?
No.
It was made by the Wachowski. I don't know if they were brothers at the time.
I think they're generally referred to as the Wachowskis now.
Yeah. It must have been... It was while I was at the cinema, so I'm thinking it must have been the late noughties. But it had the worst box office. One of the worst. I think it broke the record for the worst box office at the time. But it was actually really good. And it's like, at the end of the day, sometimes it's down to unfathomable things.
Well, commercial success isn't necessarily the same as quality. I mean, look at any reality TV show.
Yeah, I suppose. Anyway, I think we should be wrapping up soon. Because I need the loo and I've run out of beer.
Yeah, there was a sort of point to talking about J.K. Rowling trying to essentially sue someone for libel for calling her unpleasant.
Which was?
About sort of freedom of speech and how a lot of the people promoting it really don't care about it when it doesn't benefit them.
Well, it's an oxymoron, isn't it? It's not an oxymoron, a paradox.
And this comes into like with the protests where people are sort of being arrested sort of on vague ideas of sedition. Do you know what sedition is?
I think so.
I had to look it up, and interestingly enough, I saw it in The Last of Us as an example of authoritarian government as being used against protesters.
Yeah.
Basically, rebellion against the government.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's sort of like...
I was thinking the other word that came up was treason, but I suppose that would be more against a monarchy or a country, wouldn't it?
No, I mean, it comes under treason as well, which it sort of seems like something that's absolutely against freedom of speech, and yet the sort of people that basically only use freedom of speech to use an excuse when they want to say something that people think they're an arsehole for, don't seem to really raise any concerns about.
That's double think in action.
Well, yeah. But that is actual legal consequences for people saying what they think and exercising their democratic right to protest. But all the people that are like, oh, I'm being silenced.
There's always been this assumption that there is such a thing as freedom of speech, and the reality isn't.
Yeah, tell that to the people in Guantanamo fucking Bay.
Yeah. This is double think though. This is the 1984.
The thing on ignorance, and I was sort of going to bring this up when you were talking about sort of trying not to overwhelm yourself in shitty news, is particularly whilst we were watching that Bowling for Columbine. Now it came up. That's about a school shooting, and on that day, I think it was launched the biggest bombing campaign, I think, of the Iraq War. Would it have been?
One of them.
Oh, gee, yeah.
Well, one of them was
basically
the Gulf War.
On that day, a lot of people died somewhere else due to the US government being shit. Yeah, there was a lot more focus on Columbine.
Well, I like Marilyn Manson's interview in that film about that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they're trying to blame him for the violence and stuff and the music and that, and he's the one that's saying that he would listen to the kids, whereas you know that. What about the example that's being set by the governments that are invading and killing other countries? You know?
Somewhat sort of comedically tragic as well. That he's actually one of the most articulate and insightful people I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Despite what he's often portrayed as being so sort of shocking and
But that's exactly
weird.
it, isn't it? That it serves their purpose to portray him that way.
But what I was going to say was, it came up with like a montage of various authoritarian governments that the US has propped up, particularly like they even trained and funded the people that basically did 9/11 before they
Osama
turned
bin
on the
Laden.
US. Yeah. They basically gave them weapons and gave them training to overthrow their own government for US interests, and then they turned around and
Well, yeah, that's because the US,
something.
basically, when they do things like that, they then install a dictator.
yeah, the US is never interested in democracy when it's talking about its foreign policy, at least. And as far as I can tell, not when it's talking about domestic policy either.
That, to me, is fucking ridiculous when you think about the whole thing about the Russian report and this,
Yeah.
like, undercover kind of meddling in other countries' business. When you see people like us in America openly just
But I think
fucking with the rest of the world.
both of us would be at least conceptually aware of that concept. Sorry, that was a bit sort of circular.
Yeah,
We're sort of aware that the US does a lot of shady shit in foreign countries and goes on wars that aren't necessary at all and kills a bunch of civilians.
So maybe that's...
But when you see it on screen and just presented to you,
maybe that is the essence of ignorance, is then that when you know something is, but you choose to live life in a way that ignores it.
Yeah. But there's so many injustices going on in the world, and you just end up getting burned out trying to fix it all on your own when...
Well, you can't. You've got to start with your own... you said, you've got to start with...
Join a movement, give money to that bail fund if you have money. I mean, I don't have a huge amount of money, but I have some left over that I'm not using, so...
You can't change the world, but you can change yourself.
Yeah, and that's some way to start. But, I mean...
Let's face it, you're all you've got, really. I mean...
Don't play their game, I guess.
Well, that reminds me, game night's back soon, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, we've not really been doing it so much, especially during quarantine, because getting guests on when we're meant to be socially distancing is difficult. And also, I've kind of stopped talking to most of my friends at school.
Yes. I'm going to have to draw things to a close fairly relatively quickly because of my bladder.
Okay, right. That's fair. I mean, I think we sort of talked about a fair amount of things, and
some of it's been about ignorance.
I think, I mean, we sort of blended it with the news, I guess, but...
It's not difficult.
What?
It's not difficult, really, is it, blending ignorance with the news?
No. Yeah. But I guess sort of... It adds a sort of message is... I mean, it applies to a lot of various struggles, but I think there's a quote...
Oh my god!
Sorry.
Clickety, clickety, click, click.
Yeah. Angela Y. Davis. I think that might be Angela Yvette Davis. In a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist.
Sounds good to me.
I think that applies to the protest, but also various issues around the world. You can't just not be a part of it. You need to actively work against it, because otherwise we're still going to be here in 20 years and nothing's going to really have sorted itself out. The system's not going to self-correct.
No.
Anyway, I shall allow us to end so you don't piss yourself. And
It's very gracious of you, thank you.
Any final thoughts?
No.
Very appropriate, I guess. Anyway, I've been Firebolt.
I've been the Orbiter.
And this has been Breaking Bollocks, episode 64, Ignorance.
God, I need a piss.
Run, Forrest, run.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.